Okay, and on to the first topic of the show. The biggest highlight of this past week is that Kyrie Irving returned versus the Pacers on Wednesday. He dropped 22 points in 32 minutes, 9 for 17, 0 for 2 from 3. And what do you think about Kyrie Irving's return? What does this do for Brooklyn? Do you think this is going to help them along the way throughout the season? Is it too little too late because he is just playing in away games? What do you think? Because you are the Nets fan on this show, JC, I am going to start with you.
Um, you know, Seeing the game against Indiana, he definitely added that scoring spark that we've been lacking. With James Harden, Kevin Durant, usually when they're in the lineup, they're surrounded around, not the best floor spacers in general. Patty Mills is probably the best one. Joe Harris has been out for a while. So I noticed when Patty Mills isn't consistently hitting his three ball at a 43, 44% clip space in the floor, all hell goes loose. They trap James Harden. They force these other guys like Bembry and all these other guys to make plays who, it's not really in their role or in their game to be making decisions or have the ball in their hands because they're role players. We started out the game slow though against Indiana. Obviously, we're down 17, I think 17, 19 points. And I just think, the chemistry factor, we needed a continuity. Kyrie Irving hasn't played since his last game against Milwaukee in the playoffs. I believe it was game 4 where he got injured. So
Yeah.
he hasn't played. So we were all just, as Nets fans, we were wondering, like, is he still in shape? Are his handles, can he still play NBA level basketball? And in that game, he proved it. I mean, he dropped 22 points in that game. He definitely helped us in the fourth quarter, gave us a spark. James Harden wasn't really that good that game, but I think it was more so of like trying to build chemistry because one night you're asking James Harden to essentially average 22 to 25 points per game and get double digit assists. But with Kyrie in the lineup, that's somebody who we saw last year could give you 27 points per game on good efficiency and, take the burden off James Harden needing to score that many points. But the team looked good. But I noticed like at home the Nets are struggling. I believe we're just a 500 team at home. On the road is actually where we have the second or the first or second best road record in the entire NBA. So we don't have a problem really playing on the road. So I mean, Kyrie Irving is definitely going to help. He's going to pretty much ensure more times than not with him on the court that we are going to win those games. But you know, I think I just look into the playoffs. Like, let's say we get a first, second round series. We have home court advantage, and let's just say we go to 7, and one series we're home. He's not going to be able to participate in that game, and that's kind of neutralizing the team. So I believe come playoff time, I think maybe Kyrie Irving might have a change of heart in the vaccine stance, knowing that a championship is on the line. But other than that, he's a great addition to have on the road. But we don't, not that we don't need him because we do, but I would much rather him as a full-time player because he would help where we're struggling at right now, which is at home in the Barclays Centers, where I believe we're 10-10. So hopefully he has a change of heart and, hopefully this all gets situated and we can have him as a full-time player because the East is getting stronger. Everybody's getting better. The Bulls, everybody who I undermined. And, I think we're going to need a full team if we want to make it out the East.
So, Riv, you actually thought that Kyrie was going to come back, and he did in fact come back. I believe you picked him up in fantasy.
Yes, that's why, because I
He
thought he was gonna
drafted
come
him.
back.
He
Yeah.
drafted him in
I
fantasy.
drafted him. And I wanted to ask you, JC, before I went on,
Mhm.
what happened to Joe Harris? Like, I honestly don't know. He just hasn't played in a while. Like, what
So,
actually happened to Joe Harris?
so it was diagnosed an ankle sprain, and
Mm,
it was like a week or two recovery rate. But then they did X-rays and they found a couple of like I think shattered like shattered
oh,
bones,
okay,
just
okay.
Bone fragments.
like bone fragments. So he opted to get surgery, and that's why he's been out for a while. So he's coming
Will he
back
be?
soon. So
Yeah, I was about to ask. Will he be back for
in
the
the next
playoffs?
2 weeks he'll be back. They said
Okay,
he's
cool.
playing
Okay.
pretty well.
So, yeah, because I was wondering. I've been looking at Nets game. I'm like, yo, bro, he has not played. I thought he got benched or something
Uh,
because he just hasn't played in a
he's
long
getting
time.
hurt. He's really
Um,
hurt.
you look at that Indiana game, and you can just see it. The morale was high. Everybody was happy to see Kyrie. KD was happy. James Harden was happy. The team was just happy to see him. They're happy to play with him. But like JC said, and I don't think Kyrie's needed for games like this against Indiana, against Detroit, like against Orlando, like these type of games. They were down 17. I understand that, but I don't think I think Kyrie's needed for games like last night against the Bucks, games against the Bulls, against the Warriors, against the Suns. These games they haven't won. They have not beat none of these teams yet. So I think Kyrie's needed for those type of games, because I think when you look at this team and you look at the East, you look at the Bucks, you look at Miami, as constructed right now, the Nets are going to struggle in those series. Like, those series can go either way. Those are going to be very challenging series. And the one key is Kyrie puts them over the top in all those series. If he comes back, the Nets, you put them over against the Bulls, you put them over against Milwaukee, you put them over against Miami. So I think, Kyrie coming back, I think it's good because it shows he's now stepping in like, all right, maybe I understand what's at stake here. I'm going to come back. They're coming to an agreement, but eventually you need him for that vaccine. But you need him to take that vaccine so eventually he could play. But his performance, Kyrie's talented. Kyrie's one of the most talented players in NBA history. You can see it. The flash was there. The hands was still there. When you're that talented, no, in my opinion, I don't think you need much time to get back on the court. A couple practices, a couple scrimmages. When you just have the talent and the gift to play ball, I think that's just going to come. And you saw it. The skills was there. The moves were still there. And in the fourth quarter, he came and he showed up when he needed to. Like I said, though, games against the Bucks, they haven't beaten the Bucks. They haven't beaten the Bulls. Golden State beat them. The Suns beat them. Those games, Kyrie is needed. Like, he needs to be there for those games because they need his offensive output to show up. But nonetheless, for not just that performance, I think Kyrie was great on defense, great on offense. I feel like he looked fine to me. He looked like he wasn't out of breath. He looked in game shape to me. So I would give him like an A+ for that performance. I thought he was spectacular.
A+ is a very generous grade, and I can understand it, especially come down the stretch. 10 points of his 22 came in the fourth quarter. That's Kyrie Irving. He's one of the most clutch players in the NBA that we have in our game today. He's one of the most clutch players in NBA history, if I'm being completely honest. A+ is a little bit strong. I mean, he did shoot 9 of 17, great field goal percentage, didn't hit his threes, was 0 for 2. That being said, ball handling, you can always count on Kyrie to be one of the best ball handlers, if not the best ball handler in the league. I love seeing very first time he gets the ball, top of the key, hits it between his legs, gets it behind his back and goes to take his fader. That's basically his signature Kyrie move. Missed it, but it just goes to show you Kyrie has been working. Kyrie has been in the gym. He knew this moment would inevitably come, and he was preparing for it, and he definitely stepped up to the plate. I wouldn't give him an A+ yet. I want to see him start to be a little bit more consistent with that jump shot. The jump shot was hitting around mid-range, but we're going to start to see him extend beyond the three-point range, and he'll start hitting. He's been 50, 40, 90 his entire net career. He's that type of ball player. He is one of the most efficient, one of the most clutch. He can do basically everything for you on a court. And it was a great performance for me. I wouldn't give him an A+. I'd probably give him an A-, B+. But those A+ games are going to come. He's Kyrie Irving, one of the best ball players in this league. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this is where I start to get a little bit upset, because you bring Kyrie Irving to the Nets. This is when things start to get a little bit unfair. Unfair in the sense that when the Nets have Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, I don't care who any other team is putting out there, this is one of the most unbeatable teams in the NBA, period. The best offensive team we've ever seen, with Kevin Durant already averaging almost 30 points a clip on higher than 50% efficiency, James Harden being one of the best playmakers on top of being one of the best scorers of all time. And you have Kyrie Irving, one of the most efficient, one of the best scorers, one of the best ball handlers, if not the best ball handler in NBA history. It's a lot of things going on right now where you have Patty Mills, who's been very good as in his role for the Brooklyn Nets up until this point. LaMarcus Aldridge, who has been giving them good minutes down low. Nicholas Claxton, who started to heat up as of late. So this team, if Kyrie Irving decides that he wants to take the vaccine, he would definitely be well needed in those games at home. As JC mentioned, they struggle right now at home. On the road, they don't need him really. Kyrie Irving, where that's going to be the only way that he's going to get on the court is by playing road games. That's just a little bit of extra gravy for the Nets at that point. They need Kyrie Irving when they're at Barclays Center, where they seem to struggle a little bit. And it's tough to say that, oh, Kyrie just needs to take the vaccine just because he seems pretty firm on this stance. I mean, if he wants to get on the court as soon as possible, he takes the Johnson & Johnson shot. That's one shot. He'll be on the court within the next 2 weeks. It could be that simple, but I don't know where he stands, and I don't think anyone knows where he stands to firmly say he's going to do this, he's going to do that. So it's a huge wait and see, but it was definitely exciting to see Kyrie Irving step onto that court again. And he's Kyrie Irving. You can't expect anything less than greatness when he's on the court.
I'm worried about the Nets. That's what I come away with this with. I get that Kyrie Irving has come back for away games, but I don't think that's what the Nets need. They're 14-3 on the road. They're 10-10 at home, and they're at home. They've been flat out embarrassing. I sat front court. I sat baseline. I watched front and center. The Nets completely get blown off the court by the Memphis Grizzlies without Dylan Brooks, without Kyle Anderson. They did have Ja, they did have Bane, and they had Jaren Jackson still, but Jaren Jackson struggled in that game. And the Nets got blown out. The only reason they came back in that game was because the bench was the spark in it. Javon Carter, Cam Thomas coming in and giving a huge spark, Bruce Brown. The Nets have very, very big holes, and Sean Marks has not done a good enough job at addressing them, particularly at the center position. Nick Claxton is not good enough. He is young. He is an ascending player, but he is not good enough right now. And I frankly don't think Kyrie Irving is going to change his stance on the vaccine. I think his morals are very sound in what he believes in. He believes in them strongly, and he's not going to compromise his health, what he believes, for basketball. I think he feels like this is a bigger than basketball stance. So I don't think he's going to get the vaccine. And somebody brought up an excellent point. I want to bring up 2 points that people brought up that were excellent points, and I don't want to take credit for this. Somebody on TikTok, his name is MJ. He has like this show called Real Talk MJ. He made a point about maybe the Nets don't want a top seed. And at first I was like, why? And then he said, because if they have a game 7, Kyrie won't play. Kyrie won't play at home. If you have a game 7, if you're the Nets, you would much rather play away, which is so juxtaposed to what teams would normally do. And then I read an article on The Ringer about Kyrie and how he's the perfect part-time player. The reason for that is because a player like Clay, who moves off the ball and navigates around screens, players around him have to build chemistry with him. Kyrie Irving, 66% of his baskets in that Pacers game were unassisted. I mean, he's a guy who you can just plug in anywhere. He's an ISO scorer. He can be a part-time player, and he can excel tremendously in that role because he doesn't need to get into the flow of things. He is the flow. He creates his own offense. I don't think this fixes the Nets. I think the Nets have some real legit holes. The spacing is atrocious. You have DeAndre Bembry and James Johnson and Claxton on the court at the same time sometimes. I mean, the spacing is atrocious. I don't think the Nets are winning a championship this year, and it pains me to say that because I'm a James Harden fan. But even if Kyrie and Harden and KD all play, I have to take into account that, one, Kyrie's going to be there 50% of the time, and even with Kyrie, they're not what you think they are, Drew. They are not this unbeatable team with Kyrie. They are still very vulnerable, and they have major holes that teams like the Heat, like the Bulls, like the Bucks can very well expose.
Oh, Drew, he was talking to you.
Tell you what, though, I feel like there's a stat that says when KD and KD, Kyrie, and Harden all play, which has been very few times. I remember it was 9 times last regular season. They played the series against the Boston Celtics. I'm almost positive they've barely lost a game, and offensive rating wise, they have one of the highest offensive ratings in the NBA.
Jason Tatum beat them.
That was the one game, correct?
Yeah, 50.
That and it took Jason Tatum dropping 50 points for them to lose that game. I think that as long as you have James Harden hitting his shots come playoff time, the point to take into account that you said is 100% sound. You have Kyrie Irving 50% of the time if he's deciding not to take the vaccine. If you do believe that, and if that does come into fruition where he does not take the vaccine, he's only playing 50% of the series, then I'm with you. You need Kyrie Irving 100% in for this team to be what I do think that it can be once it's all together. That being said, I agree with what you're saying. If Kyrie Irving is going to be there 50% of the time, you're going to have to rely on what has been going on of late with the Nets, where they have mediocre spacing at best. They're playing lineups that are a little bit questionable, but you're relying on Kevin Durant to be Kevin Durant, which he has been, and it's been working for a good portion of the season. And you have Harden, who has been cooking up of late, started the season off slow, but we're slowly but surely starting to see Harden come a little bit more comfortable in that Nets offense. It all comes down to two things for me. Because I know KD is going to be KD come playoff time. It's going to come down to if Kyrie is going to be all in. If Kyrie's all in, I have no worries about the Nets. And if 2, James Harden's going to be James Harden come playoff time. Those are the biggest questions, because as long as you have that big 3, this big 3 is good enough to get you to the finals. I don't know if it's good enough to win the finals, but this big 3, talent-wise, offensively, is good enough to get you there.
Well, I want to, I think with Kyrie, it's not just if he's all in thing, it's health too. Two key playoff runs to the finals, Kyrie has been injured. Last year and the year with LeBron James, 2015, I believe it was. Yep. He gets hurt, misses that. They go to the finals. Last year, a crucial year for them. If he plays, people say they probably would have went to the finals. It was a big chance they could have went to the finals. He gets hurt. I think, like you said, and for them, I forgot the guy you name. I think Real Talk MJ, or was it the second guy where you said the Nets they want to play on the road in the playoffs. They're a second seed right now. So for them, they will have to drop. And even then, that's still a really tough, like to go into the playoffs on the road and to see the teams that they're going to have to see 2 top teams out of Miami, Milwaukee, and Chicago. They're going to have to see at least 2 top teams in the second round and third. And maybe even a tough team in the first round. I'm not going to say, Philly's a great team, but that's still a tough series nonetheless, especially for them, because that's a bad matchup for them. Even, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, that's still a tough task to ask, And with Harden, he got hurt last year. It's going to be tough for them. But I think, I'm not going to say their holes aren't glaring, but I think, David Duke, he's come on strong. He's a solid player. When Joe Harris comes back, he's going to create some more spacing. Hopefully he can hit in the playoffs. Patty, man, I think their lineup when Joe Harris comes back, and hopefully if Kyrie, whatever he decides, I think that lineup of Kyrie, Harden, Mills, Harris, KD, that's a pretty dangerous lineup. All 5 guys can shoot, all 5 guys can space the floor, and then you really can't double team. I understand the Claxton thing. Yeah, that's going to suck, because for teams like Milwaukee and Philly, that it's going to trouble you. You saw it in the Philly game, and B just imposed his will. So it's going to be tough, but I think the holes are glaring. But like Drew said, when you have 3 guys at that type of talent, they should be able to overcome those glaring holes.
But listen to what you said right there. You mentioned David Duke. This is who the Nets are trying to put their faith in. The Nets are trying to put their faith in guys who are either too young or who are washed. If it wasn't for LaMarcus Aldridge coming to the Nets this season, their depth would be in dreadful shape. I mean, Paul Millsap is not who he once was at all. Paul Millsap is not a good player. And for example, I'm just going to do this comparison. I think Torrey Craig is better than Paul Millsap right now. I think Juan Toscano Anderson's better than Paul Millsap right now. And
easily.
We're talking about Paul Millsap, somebody that before this season, we were creating graphics of him featured on this team like he was part of this super, super dynamic, unstoppable team when he's a shadow of who he once was. Blake Griffin, we haven't even mentioned him, but he is, inconsistent. He's just, he is what he is now. He's not who he once was. So they're either relying on guys who are too young, players that are too old and they're not who they once were, or players that offensively give you a lot, but defensively don't bring anything to the table.
They sound like the Lakers.
This is so foul. How could you say that when we're playing great basketball right now?
I don't know. I feel like, them having those guys, James Johnson, Bembry, granted, offensively, they're probably not that good, but defensively, they do give you something.
So,
and,
Riv, do you think that the Nets should still cut Bembry?
No. He's proven his worth for them. I got a lot of flack for that on Twitter, but he's definitely proven he's one of their best defenders. But that's even still, that's not saying much, for me personally, that's not really saying anything. But he is one of their best defenders. But you're right, they do have some holes. But what do you like? Because we're saying they have holes, but I don't think they can really fix it at this point in time.
The
their
buyout
best
market could be
chance,
the
I
only
think,
thing.
their best chance was getting JaVale McGee, and they missed out on him. Maybe Thad Young is a possible target who can probably help them. Really, it's tough because there's really no players on the market right now that can really help them in what they need right now. So they have to just, and also James Harden has to be better. I mean, just not too long ago, he had back-to-back 30-point games, but he's followed that up with 19, 18, and 16. Like, he has to be better himself, and we see it sometimes, but we see flashes in it. And in order for the Nets to be this unstoppable trio we think they can be, Harden has to be MVP Harden, Houston Harden. And right now, he looks like a better version of what he was in OKC, which is, he can be great, but, even though he's leading the league in assists or tied for first right now, he's still turning the ball over way too much, and it's costing the Nets.
Sure.
And he has to be better.